The perilous journey of the protagonist continues, waking up from the train crash which he initially intended to use to get out of the Playtime factory. Puppy rerouted the train leading to it crashing, which took the protagonist to the Playcare, a place where the orphans were kept in and seemingly watched before being selected for each experiment. Being seemingly injured, the protagonist notices he's being carried by a large entity being dropped in a chute, noticing the entity carrying him and disposing of him was CatNap, the most hostile villain in this chapter. Looking around, the protagonist soon notices the place that he is thrown in as a crushing room, with the wall slowly closing in order to get rid of any disposable junk. Using his grab pack arms, the protagonist easily hoists himself up, evading a brutal death, continuing on his journey in order to find a way out. On his way, he finds many dolls impaled on stakes, with eerie writings etched on the wall, which bear sinister messages of different sorts. It's clear CatNap has been acting as one of the disciples of the prototype and punishing any toy or essentially person transformed into a toy who has been trying to escape and not follow the prototype as CatNap sees fit. Soon finding a tape with the title labeled as Claire Harper, The Brief displays how one of the adoptive parents, called Claire, explains how her child, called Marie, was traumatized and hospitalized after being exposed to CatNap's red smoke. The person she speaks with seems very unsympathetic, and through the way that she speaks, it seems she is very indifferent and even possibly bored and annoyed that she has to attend to a concerned parent, trying to dismiss it as usual work.
Dilated pupils and quivering lips. The way her eyes darted around the room, and I swear, her hand in mine, it felt like her blood was boiling beneath her skin. Miss Harper, we'll provide the very best care we can offer. You have my word. But vitals show normal, and we'll continue to monitor. She'll be okay. No! Well, pardon me if I'm not comforted by that. Just bring my little girl back to me.
Claire breaks down crying and screaming, trying desperately to stop them, which clearly shows that she knows what's next to follow, with the organization performing experiments on the children to transform them to even more live toys. So this in a way shows that all the adults in the Playtime co-factory were not evil, and many of them actually cared about the children. Soon enough, the protagonist comes across a few cut-out boards of the smiling critters who all break into screaming from the top of their lungs, displaying the severe trauma that they experienced. Soon enough, receiving a strange phone call, the protagonist picks up the phone with a child-sounding person called Ollie, instructing him what he needs to do, explaining Puppy needed the protagonist to help them, hence why she derailed the train to redirect the protagonist to the Playcare. Her intentions still remain ambiguous, as she has been only telling a fraction of the truth and hiding her true intentions, leading the protagonist to more danger even, facing more hostile mascots in order to kill them. So it's not very clear what her true intentions are. Listening to Kicking Chicken cut out, he explains how he has never been out, being forever trapped in his nightmare-fueled place that they call Playcare, depicting the cruel conditions that these experimented on children live under. They are experimented on and observed through one-way mirrors or observation glasses, and in case any of them don't provide satisfactory results, they are killed or destroyed. Especially the presence of a compression room which has a chute directly leading there doesn't paint a good image of how the unwanted experiments were treated. Getting on a tram to go further into the Playcare, the protagonist listens to an introduction tape from Elliot Ludwig, who explains how his biggest drive for creating the company was to bring a smile to children, eventually thinking of an adoption initiative and an orphanage beneath the organization. But of course, it's not clear what his true intentions were, with the fate and legacy of this place being something much more sinister and tainted, experimenting on children whom they vowed to protect and bring a smile to, which they brought fear, trauma, pain, and sadness instead. Elliot Ludwig was the founder of Playtime Co. and someone who was a family man, loving his family, who suffered a tragic loss, not explained if it was his child or wife. Nonetheless, Elliot, at least on the surface, displayed a kind and generous character, wanting to help children, but his true intentions were never revealed, and it's not yet disclosed if he was the brains behind the horrifying experiments, or if his team took his legacy to dirt, and without his permission and supervision, taking a different path. Exploring Playcare, the protagonist finds a few glass cylinders which reveal that the red smoke is created here intentionally, which explains that CatNap's red smoke changing from clear aromatic mist was not by accident, but the lying and dishonest organization intentionally created this red mist in order to force children into sleep, and most likely gave it hallucinogenic properties to test its effects on the children. They essentially treated the children like lab rats and paid little care to their well-being, and instead painted a picture of care and compassion. In order to go further down to face the prototype, they need to turn this machine off, which requires the protagonist to go to different parts of the Playcare and solve a few puzzles. Traversing across the Playcare, the protagonist enters a room full of red smoke where he can't do anything else but to breathe it. This, mixed with the horrifying telltale signs of the atrocities which took place here, gives the protagonist a nightmarish trip, seeing scratched sentences on the floor on why such things were done in a place which was supposed to do the opposite, a place meant for fun, happiness, and compassion. This of course might not come as a big surprise to adults, as they are used to dishonesty of the world and the corruption in the very places which are meant to protect and help us. But for an inexperienced child, being impressionable and trusting, it comes as a big shock and a confusing and baffling thing to how something like this would happen. Why would someone promise protection and love and in return give hate and pain? Entering what seems like a corridor maze, which seems to be resulted from the effects of the red smoke, a series of radio announcements reveal that the authorities found the mutilated body of a young boy stuffed inside a duffel bag in Elliot Ludwig's estate, which had crucial bones and organs missing, which leads to Elliot being investigated, with the company still keeping his name in the legacy of the organization and its brand, dismissing the accusations that he was the culprit, saying that he has been framed. This unveils the horrifying way of how the children were transformed into their plushy and soft toy bodies, having vital organs removed surgically from their bone and flesh bodies and placed inside the plastic and fluffy toys. Therefore, we now know why the toys bled and experienced pain, as their organs were placed inside these bodies, making them bleed and have organic body parts inside them, including some prosthetics. Continuing down the surreal maze, a sentence etched on the floor confronts the protagonist as if directly that guilt haunts him. It seems more and more likely that the protagonist was involved in the experiments that took place here, possibly even being a scientist, hence why Mummy Longleg even targeted him. Watching a tape starting as a commercial for the Playcare and how fun and fantastic it is, it slowly takes a more sinister turn, guilt-tripping the protagonist, telling him how after doing what he did, returning after years and seeing the incomprehensible evil and horrors that he did, it will haunt his conscience and the monsters that he created will hunt him down, eager and hungry to punish him.
Should you come back years later, your conscience finally getting the better of you, may you descend into the dark and the dust, finding all that awaits you are incomprehensible horrors, each hungry for your return, each eager that they might find you.
That's when a nightmarish digital Huggy Wuggy comes out of the screen, chasing after the protagonist, when it finally catches up to him and consumes him, with the protagonist losing his consciousness from the sheer fear. He soon awakens, revealing that it all was a result of the exposure to the red smoke, with the protagonist's conscience tormenting him for what he has done, confirming that he was part of the organization and he was most likely a scientist, or even worse, maybe even one of the major characters such as Elliot Ludwig himself. Waking up with the effects of the smoke wearing off, the protagonist finds himself in a normal-looking room, a lot smaller than the large maze-like corridors that he found himself in, revealing all that he experienced were figments of his imagination and guilt shown to him. Therefore, listening to the radio announcements and tape at the end were all unspoken thoughts that the protagonist has had throughout his journey since chapter 1, which means that he was part of the experiments and knew about Elliot Ludwig's scandal and the mutilated child that they found, meaning he is a major character. Finding out of the tape, it reveals the deceptive and cruel persona that the scientists had when a child inquires about his friend called Kevin, whom the scientists have taken to experiment on, labeling him as Experiment 1322, lying to a concerned Joseph that Kevin got sick and they are making him better, gaslighting Joseph that he's being too nosy and should get some sleep in his designated place.
Clear neural abnormalities were detected in his recent checkup.
What is he doing with my friend?
What are you doing out of bed? How did you get in here?
Is Kevin sick? Why did you take him away?
Yes. Kevin is very sick.
While trying to find a way out of this place, the protagonist enters a room where he observes a distracted Kissy Missy, who is holding a portrait of a child in sadness and regret, as if this portrait is of no other than the girl who was transformed into Kissy Missy. This displays how the mascots and the toys were all once children who had their vital organs surgically removed and placed inside these toys, which are now monstrous entities that they don't recognize, being sad, angry, and full of regret and resentment to why all this happened to them. Managing to find a gas mask, the protagonist wears it to go through places filled with the red smoke unharmed. While trying to find a way out, the protagonist comes across several baby cribs and pictures of many children and babies, revealing the organization's experiments were not limited to any age. They also experimented on babies. As he leaves Home Sweet Home section of the Playcare, Kissy Missy pins him to the ground, deeply looking into his eyes, thinking he might be a threat when Puppy comes out of nowhere, stopping Kissy and telling her that the protagonist hasn't done anything wrong. Regardless, Puppy goes on explaining that she is sorry for derailing the train, but they desperately need the protagonist's help as he has proven to be very capable and he could defeat CatNap as well, the final obstacle from getting to the prototype. She explains the prototype was the one trapping her in her casing and that he is the reason behind many of the toys dying, not being able to go free. She further explains that her intentions are to seek the protagonist's help in killing both CatNap and the prototype as a cause for revenge. She's very suspicious to say the least, and most likely she has ulterior motives, wanting to kill the protagonist as well, and maybe claiming authority and dominance in the Playtime co-factory. I wouldn't be surprised if she is actually a major character who was turned into a toy, and as I theorized previously, being Stella Graybear, who wants to take over the organization and free it from any opposing force. Separating from Kissy Missy and Puppy, Ollie contacts the protagonist, informing him his next stop is the school where he shouldn't be bothered by CatNap any longer, but instead another character will be there known as Miss Delight, a teacher character who taught the children. That's when Miss Delight speaks directly to the protagonist, confirming he used to work here, but soon changes her attitude when she learns that he is here looking for his co-workers. She also mentions a mysterious character called Barb, who strangely seems to be close to her majority of time, which is also shown in a note where she talks about a never-ending hunger from a pet in her, which Barb explains needs satiation by seemingly eating other people. That's when, trying to use a generator, Miss Delight breaks through the floor, depicting she has a broken face, her outer dull shell showing her internal parts being very similar to humans, confirming the way that the experiments were surgically transformed into these monsters. As the note reads, she adopted a technique for pretending that she is dead or an inanimate object, and when her victims wouldn't look, she would attack them and consume them, which is exactly how the protagonist encounters her. She seems to be very powerful, breaking through barricades and fences, moving very fast when not looked at. After being chased for a while, the protagonist outsmarts Miss Delight by shutting a heavy restricted access door, which she tries to slide under, but misses by a second, which the gate closes on her, squashing her, which seemingly kills her. Moving on to the play area, the protagonist becomes swarmed with smiling critters who make unintelligible sounds, chasing after him, who can be scared off by flares from the new grab pack hand. The cruel reality of these entities could be that they were children or even babies transformed into these little monsters who didn't even possibly know who or what they are and how they are supposed to behave, being very hostile or simply extremely hungry, wanting to desperately eat, not knowing any better as they were never trained how to behave. Soon enough, the protagonist finds a brutal scene of Dog Day, the last surviving member of the Smiling Critters, having an adult voice explaining that millions of toys have been manipulated to work with the prototype and in return to be fed, to feel the empty howling pit of hunger which missed the light, explained in her note. Just when Dog Day instructs the protagonist to run, tens of little smiling critters crawl inside of him, eating him from inside out, gaining control of his body, which starts chasing after the protagonist. This reveals what will happen to heretics or toys who disobey the prototype and oppose him, that they become severely punished. Managing to outrun the possessed Dog Day, Ollie confirms that CatNap used to be a kid called Theodore Gramble, who suffered a tragic accident, who only survived because of the prototype saving him, giving up his own freedom. I made a full video explaining who CatNap is, which you can watch by hitting on the card above, which explains his origin, so I won't go into much depth about it again. Essentially, Prototype saving his life by sacrificing his own freedom led to CatNap or Theodore worshipping him like a god and punishing anyone or anything standing in his way. Going to the counselor's office now, the protagonist watches a tape about the Hartmans who want to adopt when they talk to Stella Graber, learning that the kid that they wanted to adopt is being tested on, with the parents getting severely angry and starting to panic, as if they know what testing means, knowing the child is being experimented on. So it's not really clear how many people knew about the cruel experiments that were taking place here, and of course, as it seems, many of them opposed it and wanted to actually stop the organization from doing so. When trying to solve a puzzle in a place covered in the red smoke, CatNap jumps the protagonist with his mask seemingly coming off, which takes him through a trip, showing him the atrocity of what happened to the children here. As soon as he awakens from the nightmares and visions, he hears a growling voice ordering him to leave Playcare or else he would face the consequences with CatNap coming for him. It doesn't take long before the protagonist faces off CatNap, whom he manages to severely injure and incapacitate, when all of a sudden the prototype appears with his iconic arm, which CatNap kneels down for in a worshipping manner. But surprisingly, instead of comfort, the prototype kills CatNap, displaying his sinister side that he might not be as he appears for safeguarding the mascots. Confused to what he just witnessed, as CatNap didn't die but the prototype killed him, someone who was supposed to safeguard him, a god whom CatNap was a disciple of. The protagonist continues on, diverting the red smoke, opening the path. That's when Puppy appears out of nowhere, saying that the protagonist deserves to know the truth, playing a tape which has a collection of all the CCTV footage of an incident which they call the Hour of Joy, in which all the mascots and toys rebelled against all the staff members, killing them brutally, not showing any mercy to anyone who was a human. This corresponds to one of the very first tapes found in Chapter 1, where a scientist explains that the ones from the below are rebelling, which is followed by screams revealing the ones below were the experimented on children and adults from the orphanage, resurfacing and killing anyone that they thought to be guilty. It seems the massacre took a long time, possibly an hour or longer, which Puppy explains as a ruthless and pointless slaughter, not only killing the ones who were guilty, but any living person, even if they were innocent. To the children transformed into monsters, they saw the adults the same, killing them indiscriminately, being a horror show. That's why Puppy wants to seek revenge against the prototype and kill him, the one who orchestrated the Hour of Joy, organizing the massacre, manipulating and gaslighting the children, who are the toys, to do so. Subsequently, they took all the corpses to the bottom of the factory, where the mascots ate them all to satisfy their hunger. As Puppy takes the protagonist on an elevator to go further down to face the prototype in his domain, with Kissy Missy staying behind, all of a sudden she starts screaming as if struggling, with Puppy quickly reverting the elevator to go back up to save her when the chapter comes to an end. So what did really happen to Kissy Missy? Is it possible the prototype got to her and killed her, or is it possible another entity got to her? That's what we will find out in the next chapter, which could potentially be the last one, where we will face the orchestrator of it all, the prototype. And that is it for this video, folks. If you enjoyed it, make sure to stay tuned for more by hitting on the subscribe button and the notification bell. As always, it's been your host Star, and I will see you on the next one. Have a fantastic day.